Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Live with Anton Gunn. It is Wednesday. I'm so happy to be with you. And thank you for joining me for this conversation because today we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, or at least, if not our hearts, our pocketbooks, our mortgages, our credit cards, our debit cards, or our retirement accounts. And that is the banking and financial services sector. Now, the reason why today I want to spend some time talking about the banking and the financial services sector is because there is a crisis brewing right now. And when I mean crisis, I'm going to just say it like I feel it. The banking and financial sector is on the struggle bus. Now, when I say on the struggle bus, they're struggling to retain their top talented employees. That's number one. Number two, they're struggling to build a culture that is inclusive, that is inspiring, and keep people focused on the right things rather than the wrong things. Now, what do I mean by all of this? I'm just telling you right now that the banking industry is critical for all of us. I mean, we cannot escape the U.S. monetary system in some way. So whether we use a credit card processing machine to process transactions, whether we go to the bank and deposit checks or we get ACH deposits, it doesn't matter how we get this thing we call legal tender. At some point in time, you're going to interact with the bank. And when you interact with the bank, you want to make sure that experience is a good experience. But many times in recent years, that experience is not a good experience for most people, whether it's on the phone, trying to get information about a mortgage or about a loan, or whether it's going into the branch to do basic transactions. Now, I'm going to tell you why that all is. It goes back to two things: the employees in the organization and the culture in the organization. But I want to give you a couple of examples of what I'm referring to when I talk about the challenges or the struggle, if you will, in the banking and financial services sector. So I bank at several institutions. I don't have all of my money in one bank. And I think most people today don't have all of their money in one bank. They don't just go to one single solitary institution. And there's a reason why, is because we have a lack of trust in the banking system in general. We don't put all of our eggs in one basket. Maybe that lack of trust goes all the way back to the Great Depression, or maybe even the Great Recession of 2009. I don't know what it is, but most of us don't bank with one bank. So I'm going to tell you two stories very briefly about two of the banks in which I bank with. My family banks with these banks, and I'm going to share two stories. So the first is Bank One, where we enjoy this bank because we know some people who work at the bank in a leadership role. They're not necessarily over every branch location, but they work in the headquarters. And because we like them and trust them, we have accounts at that bank. We've done business at that bank. However, at this one particular location where we do most of our transactions, we have gone in there on multiple occasions, and it's a new person almost every time we go in. And when I mean a new person, if we went in the same time for 6 consecutive months, we might have seen 3 to 4 different people at that branch at the same time, which means people don't work a consistent schedule. I'm going to come back to scheduling a little bit later in this conversation if I can. But I want you to know the issue is this. It's not about them having different people. They can have whoever they want to work those schedules. But here's when you know what's a problem. When that person who is handling your transaction is putting money into the wrong accounts. And as you're standing there at the counter talking to them, they can't figure out what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. So they got to go ask for help for somebody else. I'm telling you that there's somebody always in training at this bank. Somebody is always trying to figure out how to do their job. They're OJT almost every time at this bank. And literally, they put money in the wrong account. Now, we have multiple accounts at the bank, but it was real clear where the deposit was supposed to go, but they put it into the wrong account. I don't even want to start to tell you about the times that I've come in, and because I was dressed casually in a t-shirt or in a baseball cap, they didn't believe I was who I said I was. And I was only making a deposit. I wasn't making a withdrawal. I was just making a deposit. But they asked me for 15 forms of ID and address on my account and everything else. Like, it just didn't trust me. But that's bank one. I'm going to move on to bank two. The bank two, I go in this branch, particularly on a regular basis, to make some transactions. And I always go to the counter, but at this branch, I see the same 2 or 3 people all the time. So they're consistent with their staff at this bank. However, when I go in to make a deposit or make a withdrawal, the tellers engage in conversation with me, which is great. I enjoy talking to people and learning about them. And one day, this teller asked me, "Mr. Gunn, what do you do for a living?" And I told her, "I'm a leadership development consultant. I speak at conferences and organizations on a regular basis, helping the leaders build diverse, high-performing teams and a world-class culture where nobody wants to quit because the leaders are people that everybody admires and the employees feel valued, respected, and included." And when I said that, she perked up and looked at me and smiled and said, "That's amazing." And then she leaned over to me and said, "They need you in here because these people don't know nothing about leadership. And I want to quit right now, but I got too many years in this bank for me to quit. I ain't trying to go nowhere till I get my retirement." And then I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Yeah, it's terrible." She said, and then she literally, while she was talking to me straight ahead, looking at me in my face, I could see her like nodding her head to the back and pointing to the person in a management position who was behind her. So as I'm sitting there banking with this bank, doing transactions, a longtime customer, literally have had accounts there since like 2009. This employee is telling me about how bad her organization is and is afraid to say it without getting in trouble. And we continue to transact my business, but she began to tell me about her experiences there. And then she started to tell me about employees who no longer are there. Now, I didn't notice that so many employees had left, but she started to make some hints about it. "You remember such and such? She ain't here no more. You remember such and such? He ain't here no more. You remember such and such? He ain't here no more." So she's explaining to me that they ain't keeping the top talent. And the reason why I say they're top talent, the people that she named are the ones that I had the best experiences with when I was in the bank, when I would go and transact business. I never forget this one great person who helped me establish a business line of credit. She was phenomenal in the service that she provided and talking to her. And I went back in there to ask a question one day and she was gone. And they told me that she had moved on to a totally different division, still in the bank, but to something else. And I was like, wow, she was really good at her job. Why did she leave? Those are bank one and bank two. Now, let me tell you 2 other quick stories about why the retention challenge and the culture challenge in banking is one that we have to aggressively to focus on now. We got to stop breaking the bank's culture and we got to break this turnover rate. The other 2 stories is this. Last month, I keynoted at a conference and I was teaching leaders how to build a great culture, how to be leaders of impact in their organizations. My standard and typical keynote that I would give to different organizations based upon their needs. But in the audience of this keynote was a banking executive. And when I came off of stage, this banking executive walked up to me and began to tell me about the challenges that his institution is having with their culture, how he keeps losing his best people to other banks and some totally out the industry. He was struggling and he wanted to know what he could do about it. He asked for my advice on the spot. Now, I'm telling you, that's 3 different banking institutions: bank one, bank two, and the banking executive that came off stage. But I won't stop there because there's been news stories in the newspaper recently, and I don't even read the newspaper, but let's say online stories at reputable publications, not bootleg, fly-by-night blogs. I'm talking about reputable publications like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and other publications where we have heard stories about bank employees who died from exhaustion for working 100 hours a week at an investment bank. That there's another employee who had a death and they believe it was related to how many hours they were working. I heard a story or read an article in Bloomberg a couple years ago about how Wall Street is struggling to attract college graduates because of the hours that they're offering salaries of $150,000 a year out of college to come work and do grunt work on Wall Street. And they cannot get and keep people because of how bad the environment is. And yes, I'm pretty sure most of you saw the story in the last couple of weeks about an employee who went to work in her cubicle and died in the cubicle, and nobody noticed that she was gone or missing for 4 days, that she was at work in the cubicle, deceased. And colleagues may have been walking by, seeing that she isn't responding to emails, seeing that she's not showing up to meetings, that she's not involved, and they just kept going. Died at work. This is all in the banking and the finance sector. The banking and finance sector are losing lots of great people. I know some very close to me who are trying to get out right now, asking me, do I know contacts in other places? Can I help them to get out of this place because they want to go somewhere else? Some of them just biding their time till they get the retirement. They don't feel good about it. And this is not one institution. I'm not putting the blame on one institution only, but this is an industry challenge. An industry challenge to retain talent and build a culture where people feel valued, respected, included, visible, and want to stay committed to the work. Now, I'm going to lay out for you 6 things in this video, and I'm getting ready to get into the meat and potatoes and give you some strategies. If you're an HR executive in banking and finance, or if you're a leader at any institution, if you know a leader in an institution, you might want to tag them in this, share this with them so they can see what they can do to stop breaking the bank, fix their culture in the financial services sector. So the first thing is, here are the 3 reasons why they're struggling to retain talent. Reason number 1 is the high pressure work environment. Like when you're dealing with other people's money, there's a lot of pressure to get it right. When you're dealing with people's financial portfolio and they're just banking, their checking account, their mortgage loan application, there's a lot of pressure to get it right. There's a lot of regulation. And we saw a lot of things happen after the 2009 Great Recession and the collapse of the stock market and all of these derivatives and everything. People were scamming everybody. There was a lot of legal stuff put into place to protect you and I as consumers. And that also means that there's more accountability for people when they screw up. So there's a lot of pressure on people who work in banking and finance. Those employees are stressed. They're overworked. They are literally burning the candle at both ends, not taking vacation time, working while they're on vacation. I think I told you, I've had a banking client that told me a story of one of their employees who was in the hospital dying of cancer and was still logging into Teams meetings to do work. The employee was in the hospital, terminal with cancer, and was still logging into Teams meetings at work. So there's a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. And because of that, some people are saying, I don't want no parts of that. So you are not even attracting new talent into the banking sector. As good as the salaries are, as good as the pay is and the bonus structure and all of these cool titles that people get when they go work at banks, they're struggling to recruit people into the industry because nobody wants to work 100 hours a week. I know the Gen Z don't want to work 100 hours a week. They all believe that the planet ain't going to be here 40 years from now. So why would they go into a job and work 100 hours a week for somebody else when they only got a short time to live. So they want work-life balance. They really do want it. And you can't retain talent when you got high-pressure work environments where people are working 100 hours a week and you're not even checking on your people. So much so that they passed away at work in their cubicle and nobody knew that she was there. That's terrible. So struggling in this high-pressure work environment is reason number one you can't retain top talent. The second reason why banking is struggling to retain their top talent and build a culture where everybody thrives is because of what I call cultural stagnation and resistance to change. Let's be honest. Most of the banks in the United States of America are well over 100 years old. Some of them are even 200 years old. Their philosophy, their structure, their framework is a top-down leadership model that is pretty outdated. It's pretty outdated. It doesn't fit with modern times or modern needs. It doesn't operate in the same flexibility that employees want nowadays. And it really took the pandemic for it to change dramatically, but it's still top down. And when you have this resistance to change and leaders who like things to be a certain way or the way they've always had them, the way they've always done them, the way they've always wanted them, you're not going to attract talent because people want to see an institution that's willing to evolve and adapt. And the evolution and the adaptation in the banking and finance sector is not fast enough. Wall Street today is the same as it was 100 years ago. Period. The same hours, the same routine, the same grind, the same schedule. Everything is the same. And so it's hard to really feel good about a culture when your leadership is not trying to innovate or make it better, not trying to change anything. That resistance to change is really, really difficult. Now, here's reason number three why they're struggling to retain talent. And that is this huge gap. And when I mean huge, I'm talking about ocean-wide gap on the issue of diversity and inclusion. Now, when I say ocean-wide gap, I'm talking about the fact that every bank has a statement about diversity and inclusion. They might even have a person in the role of diversity and inclusion as a chief diversity officer or a chief something or another, leader of diversity and inclusion. They got all of the titles in the world and all of the statements in the world. But what they don't have is all of the evidence in the world that they're actually doing what their statements say do and what they've hired somebody to do. What do I mean they're not doing it? If you just decide to go and look at your bank right now, just go to your bank's homepage. Go find the About page, look for the leadership team at the bank, and then pull up the list of people who lead your banking institution from the CEO, C-suite level on down, as deep as you can get. And I'm confident you will struggle to see any level of gender diversity. You'll see any level of racial diversity. You probably won't even see much age diversity. It'll be stale, male, and pale, and probably even frail. I mean, just pick a bank, the one you bank at, the one that you open your first account, if it still exists, because there's been a lot of consolidation in the industry. But I'm telling you right now, they talk a good game on diversity and inclusion, but rarely do you see that in a senior leadership role. Some banks are doing better than others, but across the board, if you think about the number of people who have the title senior vice president or president, the amount of racial, gender, ethnic diversity is limited. So they talk good about diversity and inclusion, but they don't do good on diversity and inclusion. And it's a big gap. And people who are diverse, who are skilled and want to work in the banking sector aren't going to stay around long in an organization where they never see anybody that looks like them, that thinks like them, that comes from their same background, in a leadership position. They're not going to stick around long. That is what's leading to the high turnover rate in the fractured culture inside the banking and financial services. So now I want to give you the 3 things that you can do and what you can do right now to actually address those 3 challenges of high pressure work environments, of resistance to change and cultural stagnation, and the gap around diversity and inclusion. Here's what you can do. The first thing you can do is establish some metrics around employee well-being. And what do I mean, metrics around employee well-being? I would encourage you to implement an employee well-being scorecard. Here's what an employee well-being scorecard could include. Track how many of your employees are actually taking the full amount of vacation time that you provide. So if you give people 10 vacation days in a calendar year, run some metrics to see of your entire workforce, what percentage of your employees is taking their full 10 vacation days a year, or how many people are carrying over vacation days year after year after year after year, which means they're working too much and not taking enough time off. A second metric is what percentage of your employees are out of work on family medical leave, what they refer to as FMLA. What percentage of your workforce every day or every week is out on FMLA? You might be surprised at the percentage. I remember working with an organization who literally every day they had 10% of their workforce out on family medical leave. And when I dug a little deeper, one of those employees wasn't even really sick. She was just sick of working with the people that she worked with. So she got a physician to give her a note to say that she was under stress and she needed to be out of work for 4 weeks. Literally out of work for 4 weeks because of stress. But she said it wasn't stress. She just was sick of being around people who were backstabbing and biting and undermining and conniving. And she wished she could get out there, but she couldn't find a job. We all probably know people who took sick leave, but they went on a job interview. They said that they were sick. I got COVID. I got the flu. I'm having a procedure, but they were on a job interview. That's real. So you have to get this scorecard together. So literally track vacation time, track, FMLA. You also want to track what percentage of your employees are participating in any of your wellness programs. If you got all of these benefits offering wellness programs, what's going on with them? If you have employee assistance programs where people need assistance around mental health and other things, track that data. Put a scorecard together to see how you're doing. And if you got employees who are not taking all of their vacation time, do what some good companies have done and saying, you know what? You're not eligible for your bonus this year if you don't take all of your vacation time. Like literally tell people that they won't get their bonus if they don't take their vacation time, that you want them to take time off. I know of a company who even said to their employees that if you take all of your vacation time, we will give you $7,500 to pay for the vacation. Now, this is not a big company and it's not a bank for sure, but I'm talking about innovative things you can do to lower that pressure of the work environment. Make sure your employees are taking the time for themselves the way that they need to be doing. You got to do the work around new metrics for well-being. That's the first thing. There's a second thing that I need you to do, particularly around this cultural stagnation and this resistance to change. Change starts from the top. It starts from the leadership. And if you want cultural change, it has to be driven from the top. So the executive team needs to get together and have a retreat, where that retreat needs to evaluate these employee engagement scores, how many people are not taking, look at the scorecard around well-being, and devise a strategy on what we can do to build a more inclusive, supportive, and engaging work environment so our top talent will stay with us and not leave and go work somewhere else. I remember I was working or on a project with a banking executive who had been at a bank for a very long time. And she would tell me about what they call this toxic positive culture in her organization. which is the leadership pretended that everything was great and wonderful, how positive, how great the bank is, and how good we're doing, how engaging and dynamic we are. And everybody called it toxic positivity because it was a lie. They saw it every day, the opposite of what this leader was saying. That leader is not a good leader. So you got to do something from the top to evaluate what we can do differently. And I encourage you to do an executive retreat. I'd be happy to take you through an executive retreat to understand what's going on in your culture, to understand what you can do right now to reduce the number of reasons why people quit, so you can retain the best people and build a culture where they want to stay there and help you to thrive as an institution. So you got to focus on the top down. You got to focus on the top down, and that starts with your executive leadership team, the senior most people in the organization. It ain't up to the frontline manager to lead the change. It's up to you and the entire executive team to lead the change. That's number 2. Now, the third thing you can do around the DEI gaps, and this is real, is that you need to come up with a coherent and effective strategy to make your institution more diverse at the top, in the middle, as it is on the bottom. Because we know it's diverse on the bottom. I mean, all of us can go into a branch and see some level and some dimension of diversity in most branches we can. But at the top, on that website that you're looking at right now, you're not going to see much diversity at all. In them senior vice president's positions, you're not going to see much diversity at all. In the president's positions, you're not going to see much diversity at all. So here's what you should do. You should do a DEI audit. Look at positions, look at hiring, look at promotions, look at salaries and equitable salaries to see if people who are of color in your organization, are they paid at the same level of people who doing the same job, who don't fit any dimension of diversity? I'm telling you, I know a lot of companies where the diverse executives, even if you got 1 or 2 in the organization, they're being paid 30% what their peers being paid. And they got more experience, been at the bank longer, but they are 30% less in salary than some other executives who don't look like them. Not only that, you should do an audit and focus on leadership development. You got all of these internal leadership development programs. And what's the diversity metrics inside of those programs? Is it a third diverse? Is it 50% women? Or is it still 90% guys, 10% women, and you still tokenizing the few people of color or LGBTQ plus people who work at your institution? People who have disabilities still are not even invited to the table. You got to get serious around this DEI stuff. This is the challenge in banking, and we're breaking the industry. And that's what I call it, breaking the bank. That's why I call this breaking the bank. We're not breaking the bank in terms of money directly, but we're breaking it indirectly. Because all of the talent that's leaving is costing you money. And I'm going to close with this statistic, and I want you to understand this. Banking has, as an industry, does a good job of paying good salaries. You might make $75,000 to $100,000, and you don't even have to be a senior VP because banks got a lot of money and they pay good salaries. But here's what I want you to understand. If you have one leader in a banking institution that makes $100,000 a year and you hired them today, and if that person quits within 2 years, the 2-year quit rate, or maybe even a 3-year quit rate, it doesn't matter, 2 or 3 years, if they quit within that time frame, for you to rehire and bring in a person to replace them, it's going to cost you 214% of that person's salary. So you're literally talking about $214,000 to replace a $100,000 executive, because you got to retrain them. You got to maybe pay them a bonus to get them to come work there, maybe some moving costs because you're relocating them from somewhere else. Those are the hard costs. But the soft costs of losing that institutional knowledge, the person who knows the systems and knows the processes at the bank, those are the things you lose when you lose your top talent. So you want to retain that top talent. Stop struggling with this issue. This is what I'm passionate about, and this is what I help organizations with. I've had a handful of banking clients, about a half dozen of them. And all of these challenges that I laid out, most of my clients have these challenges, and I've been able to help them to empower their people, empower the leaders in the organization to retain their people. This is what we must do in this particular industry. So I want to thank you for your time and your attention. I hope this has added value to you, helped you to understand that we got to fix what's broken in the banking and financial services system as it relates to retaining talent and culture. Come back next week as we will have another conversation about the challenges in another industry that's critically important to all of us. So I want to thank you for watching. Everybody have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next week for Leadership Live with Anton Gunn. Take care.